Welcome to the DevReady Podcast, where we're helping non-techs build better tech. Today we're joined by Ann Pocock. She is the founder of Kinetic Effect, focusing on marketing strategy as well as consulting and leadership coaching. We've brought Ann on to have a bit of a conversation around a couple of those areas and maybe a little bit of focus on marketing, because we know it can always help our listeners to how we're marketing and positioning our products. Ann, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Great to be here.
Really good to meet you face to face and have a bit more of a deep dive into some of the things you're helping businesses with. So always great for our listeners to understand a little bit about you, your background. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to Kinetic Effect?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a marketing strategy consultant and an executive and leadership coach. I have a couple of decades of experience in marketing communications roles, particularly towards the end of my corporate experience, which I stepped away from at the end of 2019. I was in marketing leadership roles in the tech space. And then I moved into the consulting space and coaching space, where I primarily work with SMBs on building their marketing strategies, their brand positioning, sales and marketing alignment, as well as coaching of business leaders and their sales and marketing team members as well. So with my broad background across marketing and comms, I've kind of seen it all. So that allows me to be a strategist with quite a broad set of skills or background that I can bring to my clients' needs. Primarily the clients I work with are service-based businesses or B2B type businesses as well. And they're anywhere from one person to a couple hundred, really. So, yeah, quite a range.
Yeah, a little bit of a range there. So obviously our listeners will be quite keen to understand about your technology background and working in that space. Can you just elaborate a little bit more there?
Yeah. I started out in tech. So I worked for a computer networking company when I was 18. I took a year off uni, did an IT traineeship, went to TAFE, learned about computer networking and for a company here that was based in Melbourne. So it started out in that, and then I moved to work for an internet provider actually, and the founder of that was Steve Baxter, who's one of the Shark Tank judges.
He is.
Yeah, so very early background in that space with dial-up internet. And towards the end of my corporate career, I worked for Accenture, so one of the biggest technology companies in the world. And then I moved into being a marketing director for a IT and telco business called Spirit Technology Solutions, and they're Australia's fastest non-NBN, so wireless internet provider. And I scaled that from being primarily a B2C business to B2B. Then now many of my clients are in the tech space now, from cybersecurity to AI software to IT businesses and so on. Other developers I've got clients as, yep.
Yeah, no, brilliant. In terms of being involved in the technology space, sticking your teeth into it, going to do some courses as well, I like that. What have you found along the journey? Is it predominantly B2B or B2C that you spend your time in terms of helping, or is it a bit of a mix?
It's been a mix, actually, but primarily, if we were going to label it, B2B or B2C where it's service-based. Yeah, so rather than fast-moving consumer.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. Perfect. Over that time, what's some of the things that you've just learnt? Obviously, technology has evolved over the period of time that you've been around in technology, especially you've been the dial-up internet and moving to where we are today, and then Spirit, which is the other end of the spectrum. What's some of the things that you've learnt about being a part of the fast-moving industry like technology?
Yeah, be curious. To help stay abreast of the change. I think that's the sign of a really great leader, regardless as well. I think just not be afraid to, particularly because I have a non-tech background as a marketer, right? So when I'm in the tech businesses, my role is to turn that into language and messaging in a way to connect with the audience in a way that they hear. And so not being afraid to ask what you might feel is a stupid question of the technical leaders and the engineers and the developers and things like that in your organization, because, if you don't sort of get out of your own way and be a bit uncomfortable with the unknown, then you're not going to learn, and you're not going to be, creating the best way to go to market, best way to connect with your audience. So for me, it was building my confidence and the confidence of my team members that I led, but also putting in place some structures to be able to get that context and that information so that you could help grow the business.
Yeah, there's a bit in that. I think curiosity is very important, and especially when in anything really in life, if you're really going to succeed, especially things that are moving so quickly, staying abreast of what's happening. You drop a ball for a year in this space, then things can be very different than they were 12 months ago.
All over the place.
Yes.
Completely.
Yeah.
Have you found having that experience has helped, your experience has helped in going into those businesses because you have some knowledge already rather than it being like a blank slate?
Completely. Absolutely. So I've marketed a lot of different technology solutions now, from, blockchain to AI to robotics, to wireless internet. So I've gotten pretty comfortable with trying to learn the subject matter as well as I can. So that's been very helpful. There's not a lot that I haven't been exposed to in terms of different tech solutions, but I always go with a beginner's mind around it as well, because every organisation has a different way of articulating their value proposition. The tech is moving at a fast pace, so what I might have learned and marketed, a few years ago has absolutely changed and evolved now. So each client has a different way of articulating their products or their services, benefits and features.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes a lot of sense how it all is moving. In terms of marketing for technology products, you mentioned a little bit about understanding the tech leads and getting your head around that and basically understand the product to simplify the message. How do you encourage people to start with simplifying message? Because all too often within a technology product business, things can get very technology focused and also go over the top of the customer's understanding or even head. How do you encourage people to simplify that message just to really bang home what the key problems that you're solving with the product are?
I'm a really big collaborator. And so for me, I build a sense of comfort between, let's say, the more customer-facing functions and the tech functions of the organisation, so that marketing's not sitting in a silo and separate, and so that the tech functions understand how marketing can help them, how it's relevant, and how they are actually part of the marketing process or the customer experience, let's say. And so a simple way is, rather than getting a written summary of product features and benefits and then marketing just going away and hoping for the best, is bringing the heads into a room and kind of ideating through how we can turn that more feature-rich language into something that's benefits and values oriented, so that it lands more with the customers. Because particularly in B2B, you don't just have one person buying. I mean, ultimately there's one person with the budget, but there's usually a buying party of people who are considering whether to work with your business. And so they need things articulated in different ways, so that they feel safe to make a decision in you. And so by putting the relevant faces or people in your business into a room to ideate and create the value proposition around your product or your service can be really powerful, because it brings just an instant sense of alignment and collegiality around that, rather than these separate functions that do separate things and there be disconnect as a result of that, and an opportunity for the non-technical people to ask things about the product or the service in different ways, so that the technical people can articulate it using different nuances, and you essentially come up with your key messaging, your positioning around that, and then that puts your marketing and sales and business development functions in much better stead to be able to put their plans together to take it to market or reorient it in market depending on what your business objectives are, whether it's a new product or an existing product that's getting an uplift or something like that.
I think more bringing minds together is always a great way to solve problems. How do you encourage people to engage current customers or potential customers in those conversations, and how they might position it, what their understanding of the problem is? Because sometimes we can get disconnected from building product to what the customer really needs. How do you sort of engage those conversations?
Hands down. Absolutely. If time and budget allow for that, it's just so valuable to do it. Critical almost. Look, I do have a lot of clients, and I've worked in a lot of roles where they don't do that. Like, they feel like they have a good sense of what the audience or the customer base wants because of the fact that they're newer in market, so they're kind of a bit fresher and still in touch with what's happening. But I've got a marketing science background as well, so I'm able to do that with my clients and help them connect with their customers. So that could just be by way of me giving them some questions to jump on the phone and speak to their customers and get some input, or we do more formal surveys or focus groups or things like that as well, because challenging your assumptions is so useful. I think you can kind of really get your blinkers on and beeline to that endpoint that you've set your objective on and gone, hang on, we're now 6, 12, 18 months down the track and we haven't spoken to a customer about what we've changed and, pivoted on in that time. And in all likelihood, you're missing out on what you don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think you can get a little bit focused in on product and have like you said, here's our 12-month objective, just work on that. And if you're not engaging the customer on that journey, things may change, things may evolve, how they do business may evolve, which may shift the way you might want to think about your product as well. So there's plenty of things that are always moving, and there's so much competition out there that can serve our customers in different ways. And it's just sometimes being, like you said, getting the right people in the room with the customers, because you're selling to multiple parties and you need to obviously add value and perceive to add value across all the parties, not just one stakeholder, because that doesn't serve the rest of the stakeholder buying group. So I think there's a bit in that.
Especially when the stakeholder is yourself.
I think the other thing that's really useful is interview non-customers, those leads and opportunities that you lost. Go back and don't just do a win-loss review, actually speak to them and say, why didn't you choose us? Why did you lean the way that you went?
Do you find that customers or non-customers that don't buy are more engaging with third parties or directly engaging with the sales and marketing teams? Because sometimes you might find they're a bit reluctant to divulge information around decisions. So what do you approach that?
Yeah. With the right questions in a way that they feel comfortable and safe, that it's valuable of their time to share that. Sure. Yeah. As long as they completely know that it's not a sales conversation and it's in no way going to lead to one of those. But third parties can be valuable as well. But there's pros and cons to both ways. And third party, if we're talking about smaller businesses here, it's usually not particularly budget friendly to spend money on, third party market research. Definitely valuable if you can. But again, a third party calling can have its own issues, an unfamiliar mobile number, speaking to someone that doesn't have the context. So that third party is limited to the questions that they can answer and ask, and bounce from. So the conversation gets a bit stifled.
Yeah, it's just like a direct question answer type thing.
They have a very fixed script. They've got their blinkers on.
Bit machine gun questions in that way.
Yeah, understood. No, that makes sense. So just painting a picture, I'm a tech business, building a product in the middle of picking up my first few customers. Probably haven't really thought about marketing too much, but know that there's some value and benefits in a product. What are some things I could be thinking about today that will enable me to really obviously push the direction of the product in the right direction for my customers, but also start to engage a bigger network of customers as well?
Yeah, great question. Yeah. It's often something that newer businesses will delay or not think about because they're like, we don't really need to. Like, we can get our founding customers through our network, or, just using more of a sales strategy to build that initial customer base. But in actual fact, you can't do that well either if you're not clear on your value proposition and your brand positioning. So your messaging is critical, absolutely critical, because that gets infused across all of your touch points, right from the very first version of your website to your proposal deck to the phone calls that you have to, your pitch deck that you might do on a sales call, how you work the room at a networking event. The list goes on and on. It isn't just in your paid ads or going into your other marketing channels and materials for lead generation. So even right at that foundation stage where you're going out and getting your founding few clients, absolutely critical to be clear on knowing how to say the right thing to the right people. Really critical. And then, the full strategy is like saying the right thing to the right people. You really need to know that, in the right place at the right time. And place and time is essentially your channel execution, whether that's sales or business development or marketing. And obviously, as your business matures, so will your marketing function and the number of channels and the spend and the time that you spend on that. So marketing isn't just something that happens after you've got runs on the board. It's actually the bit at the very beginning, while you're product developing, while you're building your business cases, while you're really getting clear on, what your market segment is. It can be so helpful at that stage. And that's what I do, is I help people bring that thinking at the start so that they're not backtracking, so that they're challenging their assumptions right at the start, and they're set up for success to be able to, start their core marketing on the right traction channels when they're ready.
I think it's not just the marketing. If you're thinking like that up front, whatever product you're building on is the right product.
Yeah, completely.
So it's not just the messaging is right. It's going to save you time and effort and headaches along the track. You don't have to rebuild everything 6, 12, 18 months later because you made an assumption and you only queried yourself because you're building in secrecy.
Yeah, exactly right. Yep, you've nailed it. It's why it's so valuable in doing it. And yet a lot of people think of marketing as being an afterthought because it's traditionally seen as something more tangible, like a paid ad or a LinkedIn ad or a billboard or something that you can see. But it's the stuff, the intangible that you can't see, that's going to help you with your product development stage. And it's why I believe it's really critical for a marketing type lens to be infused at that stage.
There's a bit to think about there. I think that most people may not go about it that way. I do agree. I think people look at it from a perspective of product focused, maybe pick a brand name or a business name, and that's their whole, how they package it up. And from there, how they position it can come a little bit later. And I think, that's sort of generally would start as, all right, we've got a problem, we see an opportunity, and then here's some features and functions that may add value, especially when you're thinking from a technical side. And then beyond that, okay, here, hand it over to marketing, and now let's market this thing, which may be too late in some instances, to what you're saying there. How would you encourage people to start thinking about engaging with, especially if they're not marketing from a background? They may be a domain expert, and there's some of the people we might work with which have a concept which will help their market. They understand it. They've worked in it for a long time. They get it. And that's a really big value add when it comes from a marketing frame, I would imagine. But still, coming from that perspective, they still go straight into product most of the time and look at, all right, how do we build the product to get the outcome? How would you encourage them to actually start thinking from marketing first, brand first, how they position it?
Yeah. Obviously, it's a lot easier if I get on a call with them and I can educate them with what's relevant to their current circumstance. But I do that through my content. So being a coach, but also I have a background in teaching marketing as well, and also helping, technical people understand the role that marketing, sales, communications can play to support their role and their goals and agenda. And so just meeting them where they're at and showing them that it doesn't need to be arduous either. It really doesn't. Like we're not talking anything particularly lengthy to do at that beginning stage. It might be a couple of workshops that you run, you know, a brand strategy workshop or a messaging workshop, for example, or at least, you know, a product messaging workshop. They're things that I run, that I do, you know, I run them all the time for technical experts, and they find that really helpful when it comes to going to build their products, very much so. So it's an education piece and just meeting them where they're at and not overcomplicating it, and certainly not developing this lengthy bookend of a marketing strategy at that early stage where that's not going to be fit for purpose, something that they can act on quickly. So my role is just to simplify some of the bullshit of marketing for these smaller businesses too. Like it doesn't need to be, well, it isn't rocket science in many instances. Sometimes a business might be in that field. But that's what I believe in, is making it fit for purpose for where they are at. And because I do that through marketing workshops and a done with you type model, it means that it's really relevant for where they're at. And I create, you know, I have a big suite of slides in my different workshops that I can draw on depending on the business needs, the objectives that they're seeking, the list goes on, that I can help get them to feel comfortable with it and it to be, like I said, just something that's really relevant for where they're at.
I think that's important, the relevance, because sometimes, yes, we can, if we're in the small to medium sort of space, especially on the smaller end, you can sometimes get a little bit overwhelmed with that's probably the outputs of marketing. So there's paid ads, there's different types of
the shiny channels.
Marketing, there's pick up a phone and talk to people. There's all these channels, as you call them, the shiny channels. But that's really just the result of a strategy, not just the strategy, I think. We can think that that's a strategy, but in essence, it's just a piece of the puzzle that's actioning that. So how do we get to deciding those strategies, especially it will impact depending on what position you are in as a business. And I think who does that is also a part of the strategy, I think, especially in the early stages, who is also important as to what, because sometimes a founder, a domain expert could be really pivotal in those early conversations with customers, and really because they understand their needs and wants, but maybe not writing the paid ads that go on the internet may not suit their actual skill set. So I think there's a little bit of thinking in that to go through. If someone were to sort of think about this at home, what's some of the things they may sort of start from? Because I know that most people will go to, all right, let's put an ad up or let's test something. Where would you recommend they start? Is it just brand essence, how you sort of position and communicate about the product? Is that where you sort of leading people towards?
If they're not already in market, yeah, definitely. So if they haven't even launched their brand, then a brand strategy workshop is where you'd start, and you'd get your brand blueprint from that as well, which helps them understand their positioning, what they stand for. With that, you do a bit of mission and values type work, mission, vision, values type work as well. So that can be quite powerful for, if you've got a few business leaders who are trying to align on that, that's really useful as well. And from there, you can develop what your kind of set of key messages are that can get used on different touch points. So that just becomes an anchor that they can use to know how to say the right things to the right people. And particularly once they do launch, they're going to quickly start to resource with other people coming into the business, so they can share that with them and go, this is who we are, this is how we talk about things. So now you can infuse your personality around that, but this is your bedrock to support you in knowing who we are. Then you might find that they're comfortable with securing their own business initially, and it would be through business development, just tapping people in the network or, building word of mouth, which is pretty typical. And it might be beneficial then to have some marketing support by way of them getting some sales enablement materials developed. A marketing coach, for example, can just help them know what the core foundation assets are that they need, and then work with a copywriter and a designer to get, someone to build the website, make it look pretty, that kind of thing, catch people who are coming along. What I tend to find is many of these businesses will go, we need to start getting social content out there so that we can
embedded in us from a number of people in every business. What are we pushing
exactly.
in social? Yes.
Exactly. But organic social is very time consuming and generally not conversion centric. And so, yes, you need to still do it, but not by forgetting any of your other foundation activity, because often those people that you have in your network may not be potential customers as well. So you might not be speaking to the right people. Sometimes can be the case. And like I said, it can be very time consuming to pushing out content because people don't generally respond to that and say, I want to buy your thing now. It's more they're like, oh, yeah, I've seen your posts. So it's really a trust builder, a reputation builder. So,
we started the podcast not even from a marketing thing. It was just all about how do we give some value back, because we had in 2019, I clearly remember this, it was supposed to be a couple of weeks, we had it was about 5 founders come to us, and they all had blown significant amount of money on product, and I asked the question to Anthony, how do we share some stories? And one of those ladies, Judy Salmons, was episode number 1. And we just thought we'll give it a go. And it made a lot of sense. And it started just to share the learnings. And I feel like, yes, that can be valuable content, but that's not for sales channel. It's just about how do we add value to people that are interested in the area, and maybe can actually, if you can help one person by listening to a podcast like this, I think that's a big value add considering the amount of money that does get spent in this space. So that's how it sort of came about for us. But then it becomes, how do you continue with it? And it becomes an engine in itself. You need a team to deliver the podcast, to edit it. So there's a bit behind it. So, so if you're not consistent with it, there's no point starting. We're close to 100 episodes in now, which is exciting. But it's just a number, really. It's just, I think, what I get from this is a conversation with some really like-minded people and just testing your thinking, and it's a learning experience. That's the selfishness of me. I get to learn and evolve, but also, can we add some value to some other people?
Exactly. So it's something that's educational, informative, and value add.
And I think if you go into certain areas with lenses on that it's sales, then it's you need to understand what your channel you're working in and the content you're producing, what the outcome will be. And for us, the surprising thing's been sort of building good network and meeting some really high caliber people, and then also the ability for people to see good content and then help them on their journey as well. So I think it's a win-win.
Yeah, we never positioned it as a sales tool. We were trying to follow the thought leadership marketing approach, just put out content and so people can remember us. And that's where all right, we've got to do a podcast. And then that was the inflection point to say, all right, this is what the podcast will be on, because we spent 8 months talking about we've got to do a podcast and didn't know what to base it on. Like, no one wants to hear me talking about code. I mean, that's just the wrong people. There's no point talking to developers about us writing code. That's not even a thought leadership to them anyway. They're peers. That's not who we want to be seen by.
Yeah, you found your angle. It's great.
Marketing's a bit of fun too, how you position yourself, but no one knows what's right either. So it's all about a bit of testing, engaging, and seeing what the market actually perceives as well.
Completely. And you, like I said before, you can scale up your marketing when you're ready to scale up. So, great place to start when you're launching is by having, a marketing coach, I guess, per se, that can kind of advise you on those initial steps. And then you might not need a marketing consultant or a strategist for a little while until it comes time to go, okay, we're now kind of tapped out our network. We've sort of got our founding clients. It's time to get more, or we want to position ourselves for investment. So we need to, be in more places, to be seen more. So what are those right places? And the tendency is to organic content, throw some money at some paid ads and hope for the best. It's like, probably they are a good choice, but how? And what's going to be most effective based on the business objectives that they have. And often what hasn't happened in a while is a review of the customer journey as well. So when you're launching, it's more aspirational. You think it's going to be like this. Once you've got a few clients on, it's like, okay, review that. Is it actually what you thought? What are the gaps? Because those gaps then become possibly opportunities or things to just stop doing. And then they very clearly shows you where you need to go to market often. And the type of touch point or the type of connection you need to have at each milestone on a customer journey. So that can be a really great way to determine, okay, we've matured a bit. Okay, it's time for us to grow our sales and marketing, product marketing type function. Where on the customer journey are we doing really well at or not doing really well at? And then that will essentially give you your next to-do list, of which there will be some marketing activity within there, or some business development activity, or maybe there's some more product dev opportunities in there. So it becomes a whole business view, but you're doing it from the eyes of the customer. And that will help you to determine.
I think it's important what you said there around what sort of support you may need, because I feel like as we've been on the journey of business ourselves, there's different levels of support that you need, especially in the area of marketing. We've been running a technology business for, 14 years, losing track. So a little while. And then we've built a product as well and have that in a certain category, which is in the pharmacy sector. But we've learned that we need third-party support. We're not marketers per se, so you need different people. And it always starts with someone like a consultant that can come in and help. And then at what point do you bring an internal marketing director into a business? And there's all these levels of thinking that need to be had. But it's just, like I said, it's really needs to be assessed as the business is growing, evolving, and then what the necessities are, and also what the objectives are too. I think that's important to understand as a business.
Yeah, completely. And there's a lot of stage gates that you can go through to mature and build your marketing resourcing, right? From starting with a marketing coach, so someone that kind of
first.
tells you what to try and what not to do. And then a consultant that blends that with a bit of the doing. Then you might find that you get, some more marketing tech type freelancers that might do your ads or write your content for you or things like that. And then you might go, hang on, like our sales and marketing function needs more regular support. Probably, what might be good is you kind of get a virtual head of marketing or a virtual marketing manager on demand. So there's a lot of on-demand type models where there's lots of marketers out there that are gigging and have multiple clients at the same time, and you might do 10 hours a week or less or more, something like that. And then from there, will you evaluate your spend of what a wage is for a marketing manager of sorts. Obviously, if you're going to hire a marketing coordinator, then they're at a level where they'll respond to direction and won't necessarily be able to advise on strategy or play a role, at helping you meet business objectives. They're just not at that stage in their career. Yeah. And versus a CMO where you're looking at C-suite type salary. So it's just step by step building it. And you might find every 6, 12, 18 months that model changes for you a little bit. Bringing in your first marketing manager, they're usually mid-level in some ways. So they've got a bit of up and down stretch, and they're not afraid to, get their hands dirty with doing some of the doing, and are starting to build their capability around strategic advisory up to business leaders as well. And then you might find that you can tap freelancers that they oversee for you as well. But remember, they're a solo marketer. So there's, and it's, you don't find unicorns. It's like you don't find a farmer that can grow legumes and citrus at the same time. It's the same with marketers. There's things that they can and can't do. And so that person that you bring in is probably going to be quite lonely in that role. And so it's building some support around them so that they can be as helpful and as informative for you as a business leader.
I think there's quite a bit of
as well.
thinking for people to, things that people can to consider after this conversation in terms of how you might sort of position, because there's not only one way to do one thing. In the end, you've got an outcome, you've got a current position of business, and then how you might assess that and what your next steps are. So there's plenty to learn from our perspective as well. Anne, so I really appreciate you sharing and coming on the DevReady podcast. If anyone wants to find out more about your business, how might they find you?
They can check me out on LinkedIn. I'm Ann Pocock, or they can come to my website, kineticeffect.co.
Perfect, Ann.
I'm happy to have a chat, and they can pick my brain if they're curious, and they'll walk away with some tips and tricks, at least.
Oh, brilliant. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing a bit about your background and story and how you might be able to benefit some of our listeners. So thank you for coming on the DevReady podcast, and really appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yes,
really enjoyed it. Thank you.